The conflicts and the compromises. CNN celebrates the document that inspired the nation to create a more perfect union. A special series beginning Monday on CNN.
The Iran-Contra affair. What exactly happened? CNN brings you the details with live coverage of the Joint Select Committee hearings beginning next month live on CNN.
Our debate topic is the Constitution. Perhaps it's the interpretation thereof. And with us is Edwin Lawson, who joins me in Los Angeles, and Northwestern Law School Dean Robert Bennett is with us in Chicago. Now, I promised, Mr. Bennett, that we would go to you. So any rebuttal or comments about what we've heard?
Well, I guess I'd reiterate one thing I said earlier, and that is I think Mr. Lawson's quarrel is really with decisions of legislatures and elected officials rather than with the constitutional structure. The other thing I'd say is that Mr. Lawson has got a lot of decisions that he thinks are wrong. A lot of other people have a different set of decisions that they think are wrong. The fundamentalist Christians think that the public schools are all misdirected. They think there should be prayer in the schools. The constitutional system we have is one for reconciling and accommodating a whole variety of divergent views about the way society should be structured and what governmental programs should be undertaken. And one should expect to get out of that a fair amount of decisions that any one individual or group doesn't agree with. And I don't think that's surprising. Indeed, one would be very surprised if there were any other result.
Let's go to our phones and let our viewers in on this discussion. We'll go to Elizabeth in Paramount, California first. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, and I would like to ask the gentleman in Chicago. I'm going a little back, okay? Like, for instance, they allow the Ku Klux Klansmen to parade the Nazism. What happened when the Black Power was in, like A. Brown and Malcolm X? When they were all killed out, I'd like to know what happens there.
Well,
Can you respond to that, Dean Bennett?
It's hard to respond. There are certainly lots of instances in the history of our constitutional system, and indeed in Chicago itself, where the rights of black groups to march and express themselves have been protected. There are also lots of sad and unfortunate episodes in the course of our history. The Constitution does no cure-all, and it isn't now, and it never will be, for the ills of organized society.
Okay,
I think the question is not whether it's a cure-all. The question is, what direction is it going towards? Is it going to, first of all, allowing more people to participate? More people to participate in the elective process, more people to have access to the judicial process, to be able to go into court. If, for instance, the Burger Court, as it did, cut off access, we're saying you can't even get into court, then whether the Constitution is supposed to be a forum for the resolutions of conflict or not is moot because the door is closed. That forum will never be entered into, and I think that is the point. The government, the society, has to be going in a direction. And our particular quarrel is that resting upon the laurels of the past Constitution do you no good. The question is, what is the legacy that we leave to our children? And that is a product of where the courts, where the legislature seems to be going right now.
I'm going to go on to another caller, and
Okay.
we'll get back to you, I promise. Maureen from Spokane, you're on the line. Hi, Maureen.
I want to say that, first of all, that I appreciate both of your opinions. We have a specific problem that we're facing here in the Pacific Northwest. It's similar to the caller that just spoke with the neo-Nazis. Do you find that that we're allowing this because of the Constitution? We're allowing people to speak their mind, but there's also violence associated. Is that the mandate of the Constitution to allow such activities?
That's interesting. If I may respond to that.
I'm going to ask, please, that we give Dean Bennett an opportunity first. Go ahead, Dean.
Well, the decisions allowing the Nazis to march in Skokie, if that's the decision that was referred to, was indeed a constitutional decision, and it was a decision to override the decision of the local Skokie officials in the name of a constitutional right of the people who are marching. Those constitutional provisions have also always been interpreted to allow the local authorities to deal with violence or the imminent threat of violence. It's very difficult often to know whether there is going to be that violence. I think one thing Mr. Lawson doesn't appreciate is the tension between different sorts of goals that he has. He talks about access to the courts, and I would agree with him. that the recent Supreme Court has cut back on access to the courts, and I view those decisions with some alarm myself. But I see no decisions that have cut back on access to the legislatures. Indeed, most of the recent decisions have expanded access to legislatures, have expanded opportunities of people to run for office and of different groups to have their say in the legislative halls. And an awful lot of decisions Mr. Lawson doesn't like come out of those legislatures. And I think he doesn't appreciate the extent to which there may be tension, designedly tension, between the different facets of our government. It's probably one of the healthy aspects of it.
Well, it's interesting. The point that I would make to you, sir, is, say, with respect to the question of larger participation in, say, the legislative process, I think this kind of shell game is what the basic wealthy white male, quote-unquote, structure has always done. Granted, there may be more legislation on the book that makes it possible for more people to participate in elections. But at the same time that the legislature hands you that, then, particularly in terms of Mr. Meese, the Justice Department is simply taking the guts out of the ability of the Justice Department to enforce those kind of laws. At the same time, you may have paper freedom, paper liberty being handed to you by the legislature on the one hand with more legislation supporting voting. On the other hand, you have a structure whereby Madison Avenue, or I guess out here Beverly Hills, mandates that you have to have more money than the average American could count on his finger, toes, and anything else in order to run for any office. So I think what we've seen here is an expanding of legislative opportunities, as my colleague suggests, but what he does is perpetrate a sort of 20th century shell game in that they took the little p and they took it out from under the dominion of the legislature and simply put it in the hands of Madison Avenue, in the hands of the wealthy, or in the hands of the executive branch.
Well,
in Mr.
Lawson,
Meese.
Mr. Lawson doesn't like the Reagan administration. I've got my own quarrels with the Reagan administration, but it seems to be a gross distortion of the subject to equate the Reagan administration with the constitutional system under which we've been operating for 200 years.
No, but I think, sir, that may be the fundamental point, because you seem to envision a constitution which is this incredibly sort of like cartoon piece of paper that gets up and goes and does things. I say there is no constitution any larger than the government that happens to be in power at the moment.
Interesting point.
Which is my particular complaint with
no,
these.
John,
it's not an interesting point.
Dean Bennett, I'm going to get back to you, I know, but we were going to move on with John from Woodland, Colorado.